All right, so this is our first homework for Computer Science 5010. I actually think it took me a little longer to figure out how to do a video than I did for the code. So actually glad we're doing these videos. I guess learn something new. Uh, Definitely out of my comfort range, but we'll see how it goes. So our first problem, we were supposed to write a program that reads the subtotal and the gratuity rate and compute those. So pretty simple problem. First, we're going to initialize or declare, our variables. We have a subtotal, gratuity, and the total. Obviously, those are floating point numbers, so it's easiest just to declare them all as doubles. So that is why I did that. And then just went line by line from there. Pretty simple to cout for asking the end user what their subtotal is. And then we'll be computing that or reading that in as the integer or the double that we declared. And then please enter the gratuity rate also. It's whatever they decide. If it's 15%, maybe it was crappy service, it's 7%, whatever that is, they'll enter that in as a decimal. Then we have our formula, very simple. Our subtotal, which is uh, given by the user, plus the subtotal times the gratuity, which would be the tip. So that will give us our total, and then we see our gratuity is. That is a console out statement. I went ahead and added in fixed set precision, can't say that right, to 2. So that way you would have those 2 decimal places because that is the standard for United States currency. Uh, Subtotal times gratuity, that is what the actual tip amount would be, and then inline. And then finally, their total, so that way they actually know the final bill, and then the total as a variable we used, and another inline. So a very simple program. Uh, that's how I went about it. So we'll move on to the second one. If I can get it pulled up here. All right, so the second one, definitely a little longer, you can already tell. Write a program that reads an integer between 0 and 1000 and adds all the digits in the integer. For example, 932 would be 14. And to do this, we use the modulus operator, so that percent sign, to extract the digits. For instance, in the example 932 modulus 10 gives us a 2, so we're able to figure out what one of the numbers within the user given number is, and then we just divide by 10 to knock that 2 off, rinse and repeat. So here I went ahead and declared our user integer and our total. So those are really the only 2 variables we will need. We need to know what the user wants to type in, 0 between 1000, and our total. Console out, ask the user for that input. You never have a cin without a cout. So then we have our user int that's recorded in memory. And then here I chose to, I thought it would be easiest to start at 100 because if you have 1 digit, you only need to do the modulus operator once. If you have 2, you need to do it a couple times, 3 more. So we need to know how many digits there are in the number. So if it's above or equal to 100, we know there are 3 digits in the number. And for that, if user int is greater than or equal to 100, then we have our for loop, which will add up each integer as it goes by using the modulus. So each time we use that modulus, say we got 2 from 932, you'll put the 2 into the total. And then we divide by 10, go through the same process. And because we already know how long the number is, we know how many times to do it. So that is just a fixed amount here. And then same thing, else if, then we go to 2 digits. This will work for all 2-digit numbers. And then finally our else obviously would just be a 1-digit number. And then we don't need a loop there because it will only have to iterate once to get the total. And then because each iteration added the total up as it went, all we have to do is simply put the console out statement and then the total. So hopefully pretty simple. Something else I could have done, it wasn't asked for on the program, but always a good idea is to validate the information that's given by the end user. So we could have also added a while statement that while the user integer is between 0 and 1000, it does all of that. And if not, we could give an error statement saying, you put in a double or your number was not within the range. So save a little headache for us and the end user. All right, our third problem here, actually a very useful one. If you ever want to do any banking, really something, basically some basic calculations, but in a program that will do it for you instead of having to, think about it as you go. So a monthly savings account with the annual interest rate 5%. The person is also adding in that $100 each month. That is also important. This is not just a simple savings. This is a monthly savings account. This person's adding in $100, and then he also is getting that interest rate. And we see that in the example 100, that first investment times our interest rate added back to the 100. Second month, he adds another 100, he or she, and then gets that interest rate. So it's important to make sure that we have the total from the previous being added to the new total. So that way it's not just 100 times each time. So go ahead and declare our monthly savings amount here because it asks for that. It's easier to find. It doesn't have to be 100 like the example said. I always try to declare or initialize variables when I declare them. If it's a double, I always do 0.0 to try and hopefully prevent any truncation down the line if there was some conversion between doubles and ends. And then went ahead and declared a constant double, said our interest rate is 5%. Probably could have been asked the end user for that as well, but that is what I chose to do. Just easier, especially with something like interest rates that stays the same or is used frequently and changes very little. So that way all you have to do is find it that one time, change the interest rate to 6%, and then you never have to touch anything else in the program. And then also our total. Obviously, we want to know how much money we have in the bank. So please enter your monthly savings amount here in line and see in that monthly savings. Here I did a for loop. Love the for loop all the time. Use all the time. And then we have total plus equals. So we do have that total being added up each time and added to, our original total added along each iteration. So starting out at 0, but then adding that monthly savings and the interest rate. So if we use that $100 example, we have our 100.417. And then the next time through, we have total plus equals. So 100.417 carries over and will be added to the next. So make sure and keep our totals correct there. And then see out the total after 6 months. I iterated it 6 times, 0 through 6, total of 6 times. And then just because everything was tallying up, keeping a counter within our total variable, all I have to do is put in total and it will see that out for me. If we don't know how many times it needs to iterate, that could be something that is added in. I is less than months or years. That would be another way to do it. But since we knew how many months the problem said, that's just an easy way to go about it. All right, I believe we're on to our fourth and final program for our first homework. So compute the two roots of a quadratic equation is asking us to find out if they are positive, 0, or has no real roots. That's very important if you're wanting to find out how many roots there are, because it's plus or minus. With the quadratic equation, x equals opposite of b plus or minus square root of. So maybe some of you remember that song from school. I don't know if you heard that before, but I went ahead and declared our doubles. We know there's always an a, b, and c with a quadratic equation. So I included those on the same line, initialized those. I used a variable for our discriminant, so that way we know exactly what we're looking for. And then our root 1 and root 2, as we know at most there will only ever be two roots, possibly one or none. So we have our sets of user prompts. Please enter a value for A. Went ahead and split all three of those up. C and A, prompt for B, C and B, prompt for C, C and C. Lots of C there. And then our discriminant went ahead and by itself, just our formula for our discriminant. So discriminant equals, it's B squared. I have been told that POW is a very slow way to square something, especially if it's only, to the power of 2. So just went ahead and did B times B in parentheses and then minus 4 AC. So now our value with those user inputs has been stored in the discriminant. So we don't know just yet, but our code, our machine knows what the discriminant is. So if the discriminant is greater than 0, there are two roots. So we go ahead and see out that there are two roots. And then the equations for figuring out the roots. So root 1, because we know there are two, so one will be plus, one will be a minus. And we have the equations for each of these here. So root 1, this one is the plus, you see, and then the root 2, the minus. And then it will see out the two roots, so root 1 space and root 2. And then else if the discriminant is 0, important to make sure there are two equivalency signs here, so that way we don't assign 0 to the discriminant. So if there's one root, I just included root 1 here and didn't even touch root 2. It's really the same thing. I did go ahead and store them both, but to see out, I just wrote root 1 through the same thing. And I did store them that way. So if you did happen to need to know what root 2 is, you would still have the correct answer. So use the formula there, set them both equal to each root, because there's only one when it is equal to 0. And then else, we know finally if it's a negative number, if we haven't gotten it between our first two if statements, then there are no real roots. So go ahead and see that out as well. And I believe that does it for our first homework. So hopefully these videos will get better in the future. Maybe I'll get better at it. Fortunately, it's some fairly easy code for this first week. I'm sure we'll ramp up, but we'll see how it goes. Thank you very much, and we'll do this again next week.